If you are watching this video, it means that you've made it into the next round of your fantasy playoffs, or you're just trying to avoid coming in last place. Well, lucky for you, you're in the right spot, because in this video, we're breaking down the 10 players you should be targeting and picking up on your waiver wires right now before your friends do. And the first situation will take us to what's happening right here. You can see Nick Chubb was diagnosed. He left the game early on Sunday in week 15 with a broken foot. Obviously, very sad news for Nick Chubb, who came back from a gruesome knee injury. He was pretty inefficient overall this year, and now he suffers another big injury. So he's going to miss the rest of the season, which now brings up the next guy up in that backfield, and it's Jerome Ford. And we kind of had a sample earlier this year of Jerome Ford in this Cleveland backfield. He had a couple of nice games. He has good pass catching skills and has been relatively efficient this season. Now, according to PFF, in week 15, you can see here Ford played 36 snaps. Obviously, a lot of these were once Chubb came out, but Ford was seeing a large role in this offense the last couple of weeks due to Chubb being inefficient. You get 7 carries, you get 2 targets for Ford in this game. That translates to a nice day overall. If we pull it up here, on these 9 touches in the game, he tops over 100 yards. He puts up a touchdown. Obviously, this is not sustainable, but the fact that he was able to have such an efficient day, over 10 yards per carry, 10 yards per catch as well, against the Chiefs, who are borderline, if not the best, the top 5 run defense, top 5 against fantasy running backs. This was the best day a running back has had all season against the Chiefs. That's something that we can take as a positive thing moving forward for Ford. And again, if you remember earlier this year, this was a solid producer, right? When Nick Chubb was injured in week 1, he was a top 10 running back. Then he puts up 7 as his low point. You're getting 10, 15, 7 points. Then he gets injured in this game, and then that's when Chubb comes back. So if you're looking across these first 5 games right here, the game logs on Player Profiler, you're getting 3 games of at least 10 fantasy points, nothing below 7 fantasy points, which is obviously not great, but it's not a 0 or a goose egg in your lineup. And if we were to scroll over to his receiving production, this is what's encouraging, right? You're getting 6, 1, 3, 7, 3. Like, you're getting decent receiving production, and that's important because you're in an offense in Cleveland that hasn't been good. Jameis Winston just got benched. Who knows if he'll play next week, so they might be trailing and needing to check it down to the running back. And I just mentioned that Jameis did get benched. Dorian Thompson-Robinson came in for the final 2 drives. He threw 9 passes. 44% of those went to Jerry Jeudy, and then Dorian Thompson-Robinson on his final pass of the game threw an interception. So we'll see who actually starts moving forward. It might just be multiple quarterbacks getting pulled in and out of games. Now, it is worth pointing out that it's still probably going to be a split backfield, at least 2 to 3 running backs involved. Pierre Strong was active last week, so he was the RB3 once Chubb went down, who saw some usage. But I wouldn't be shocked if Deontay Foreman takes on the Chubb early down grinder role when Jerome Ford is still the guy with the passing downs, maybe splits the carries 50-50. So don't be shocked if you see Foreman see some touches, but Ford is still a more efficient and better pass catcher. And that's important to call out because this upcoming week, they're going to take on the Bengals. A Bengals bottom 10 run defense, overall a bottom 10 defense. They're 7-point underdogs, so no matter who the quarterback is, you can see a decent amount of checkdowns to Jerome Ford. I wouldn't be shocked to see 10 carries for 50-something yards, maybe a touchdown, 4 receptions for 30 yards, and it's a decent flex day for Jerome Ford. Speaking of decent flex days and really just a huge upside performance this past week, let's talk about Tyjae Spears, who this past week had his best fantasy day of the season. And it came in a game where Tony Pollard left with an ankle injury. He was on the sideline for a drive or 2, but he did end up returning to the game, as you can see right here. He returned to the game, and if we pull it up, you can see Tyjae Spears played more snaps, 39 snaps according to PFF, compared to 31 for Pollard, and that's because Pollard was hurt in this one. But if you go over to the carries, 17 carries for Tony Pollard, just 4 for Tyjae Spears. So when you're looking at it on just the surface, the box scores, right? Who had the most carries when you're checking your ESPN app or the Score app, you're going to see, Tony Pollard is a normal day for him. But you actually have to look a little bit closer here because this number right here is the routes run, and Tyjae Spears had 27 routes run compared to just 7 for Tony Pollard. Part of this was the game script, but we saw in past weeks when the Titans were trailing, Tony Pollard was out there running the routes. So he lost that role in this game. Was it due to the injury? We'll have to track the practice reports this week because Spears was able to have a big day. Now, a lot of this came in garbage time, and they were down by multiple scores, but that might be the case with Tennessee moving forward, who just benched Will Levis after throwing another pick 6 this past week. With Mason Rudolph as your quarterback, you'll probably be trailing in games. 6 catches, 87 yards, and a touchdown. I don't think we're going to see 6 catches for 87 yards every week, but it's not shocking to see 2 to 4 to 5 catches for Spears if you're in a deeper league and you need that option. Spears this year has kind of been a little bit, run down due to all these different injuries, a concussion, a hamstring, an ankle. He's now spent 6 weeks on the injury report out of just his 14 games. He's missed 4 games this year, so his efficiency has dropped from his really good rookie year when he was a top 10 running back, 5.5 yards per touch in efficiency, playing next to Derrick Henry last year. That's fallen off due to a worse offensive line, a worse offense, and injuries. Now, this upcoming week, we're going to see their 4.5-point underdogs against the Colts. The Colts is a good defense, middle of the pack run defense, started bad. Now they've been a little bit better, but if you're going to be an underdog for Tennessee, maybe some more Spears usage. The biggest point here, even if Pollard practices and plays, this now elevates Tyjae Spears in the handcuff rankings because we just saw what he can do if he sees extended run, if Pollard was to just miss a couple of drives. So now he's moving up those rankings, especially in a week where guys like Trey Benson of the Cardinals went down with an ankle injury. All right, gang, now before we get into the next player who is the biggest ad of the week, the most important ad, I want to let you know about something exciting, and that's our Fantasy Blueprint sponsor, Vivid Picks. Because if you love fantasy sports or just enjoy making predictions like I do, this app is for you. Vivid Picks, simply put, makes it easy to get in on the action. action. All you do is pick players, make your predictions, and then watch the games unfold. It is that easy. Now, personally, as I've been saying all year on this channel, I enjoy the more or less. It's just pretty simple. More or less receiving yards, touchdowns. You just take those options for players, you put them together, and you can try and win some cash. Here's an example of one that I have for this week's Thursday Night Football game. A pretty good game, a divisional matchup between the Broncos and Chargers. Both of their number one receivers, who have been two of the best fantasy receivers this year. Courtland Sutton over 69.5 receiving yards. Ladd McConkey over 68.5 receiving yards. These are the two options that I like the most. Sutton went under this number last week for the first time in the past 2 months, and Ladd McConkey, even in a tough matchup against Patrick Surtain, he'll move into the slot enough to avoid him. Surtain got banged up this past week, and now it's a short week. I think this is a nice spot for Ladd McConkey's strong season to continue. We take both of those guys. We combine them together. I put, I think, $20 on it to win 60, so you can triple your money. Now, here's the important part. If you're new to Vivid Picks and you use the code SAL when signing up, they'll give you a free deposit bonus up to $250. So if you put in 20, you get 20 right back. If you put in 250, you get 250 right back. So if you're ready to start making some predictions and taking advantage of that great deposit bonus, just download the Vivid Picks app now and use code SAL to start dominating today. So a big thank you to Vivid Picks for sponsoring this video and the Fantasy Blueprint. Now let's get back into it. Now that player who I believe is the number one waiver ad this week, depending on your team needs, but definitely at the running back position, has to do with this situation right here. Alvin Kamara injured his groin this past week, didn't play the final 3 drives, and now he's considered day to day. Alvin Kamara, just a reminder, is nearly a 30-year-old running back. The Saints have been dealing with injuries all year long. Their quarterback, their top 2 to 3 receivers, probably I would say their top 3 with Bum Memes, all injured. Now Alvin Kamara is banged up. The offensive line, everybody has been hurt on this team. They're playing for nothing right now. They're 13.5-point underdogs this upcoming week on Monday Night Football against the Packers. Why rush back your nearly 30-year-old running back who you just signed to an extension? There's no reason to. And if they don't bring him back, that makes Kendry Miller, especially in your 12 or 14 team leagues, a very appealing option on the waiver wire because he would start this upcoming week. This past game, Kendry Miller saw every single touch, those final 3 drives, 8 carries over that time, 9 snaps when Alvin Kamara left. As you can see right here on PFF, the snaps are 26 for Kendry Miller, 25 for Kamara. Kamara was dominating the snaps until that injury in the second half, but 9 carries for Kendry Miller and 1 target, 10 opportunities compared to 10 for Kamara. This was now not only in this game where he takes 9 carries for 46 yards, look good, averaging over 5 yards per carry, but this is now the second straight week, if we go back to week 14, where he earned 10 opportunities as well. He earned 10 in this game. He found the end zone in that week against the Giants. This is a player who has now been back from IR for the second week now, trending in the right direction, a second year back. New coaching staff who seems to like Kendry Miller way more than their previous one did, who just put him on IR for no reason at all. Their previous head coach, Dennis Allen, and now he's back finally. As I mentioned, it's not the greatest spot for scoring, right? You're a 13.5-point road underdog against the Packers defense that the linebackers are playing better. We just saw them against Seattle bottle up Zach Charbonnet, albeit the Geno Smith got hurt in that game on Sunday night. But this is a brutal spot. But here's the thing. If you're in a situation where you need a flex, maybe you're in a multi-flex league, a 12 or 14 team league, you're probably going to get 10 to 12 plus touches out of Kendry Miller, who has looked good lately, and that could be enough and is enough worth an ad. Especially when you look at the fantasy championship, if Kamara was shut down for the year or forced to miss the rest of the season, the Saints will be at home against the Raiders, arguably the worst run defense, definitely a bottom 10 to bottom 5 run defense. This is a matchup where I can see Kendry Miller, fantasy championships, getting 16 to 18 touches, putting up 100 plus yards and a touchdown. He's worth an ad. Now, if Kendry Miller isn't the number one ad of the week, this next guy is. It just depends on your need at the tight end position. And that's because the Jaguars' second year tight end, the second round pick, former Penn Stater here, is honestly having a great season when he actually gets to start this year. Now, the reason why he's worth an ad is because Evan Ingram, before this week 15 matchup for Jacksonville, he ended up having a season-ending shoulder surgery, which made the fact, or at least it made it clear at this point, that Brenton Strange was going to start for Jacksonville. And if you look through the box scores on Player Profiler right here, the game logs, Brenton Strange actually did start earlier this year. It was in week 2 right here. He started for these next 4 games when Evan Ingram was out with a hamstring injury. And what does he do? Finishes as a top 10 tight end, not once, not twice, but 3 times. So in 4 starts this year without Evan Ingram heading into week 15, you had 3 top 10 finishes for Brenton Strange, who's also gotten more usage these past month or two, even with Ingram back, because guys like Christian Kirk have been hurt, Gabe Davis, so they're using 2 tight ends more. Now, in week 15, with Ingram out again and Brenton Strange getting the start, we can see right here, Brian Thomas had a big week. Multiple touchdowns, over 100 yards, a massive best performance of his rookie year. He has 14 targets. But look down here on PFF. 12 targets for Brenton Strange. He catches a career high, his 2-year career now, 11 balls, puts up 73 yards, 18.3 fantasy points, basically was doing the Evan Ingram. A lot of underneath passes, was put in motion a lot. Mac Jones loves throwing to the short areas, so this was a good combination here. And according to Ryan Heath of Fantasy Points over on Twitter, you can see that in 5 games with Evan Ingram out this year, Strange has now averages 6.2 targets per game and 10.9 fantasy points. That makes him a top 8 tight end, as you can see right here on the season. He earned a 26% target share, top 3 amongst all tight ends on the week. He's been absolutely great when given more opportunities. And Mac Jones, since taking over as the starter with Trevor Lawrence hurt, is throwing to his starting tight ends 8.4 times per game, Obviously, elite usage for the tight end position. And if all that didn't already sound good, it gets even better for Brenton Strange, who this week will be a 1-point road underdog against the Raiders, who allowed not only the 4th most receiving yards to the tight end position this year, but the 3rd most fantasy points per game. Strange is somebody who, coming into week 16, will be a top 10 tight end for me for sure, maybe even closer to that top 7 to 6 range. Somebody you can start, pick up, and play him if you can. Now, this player you're probably not going to start, but we have to track the practice reports because the rookie, the 6th round rookie for the Miami Dolphins, their wide receiver Malik Washington, saw a lot more usage this past week, and that could be the case moving forward for a couple of different reasons. Obviously, the big one is Jalen Waddle left this game with a knee injury and did not return. We have to track the practice reports this week. If he's limited or missing practices, there's a decent chance that Malik Washington next week will start for a couple of reasons. The number one reason would obviously be because Jalen Waddle is now injured, so Tyreek Hill would start, Waddle would be out. They just cut Odell Beckham Jr., and if we keep going through here, River Craycraft is a slot receiver. They just cut Dwayne Eskridge, although they could re-sign him. Anthony Schwartz is on IR. Grant Dubai's got hurt in this game. I believe he's now on IR. So they have nobody left at wide receiver after recently cutting Odell after he requested that. So if Waddle was out, the number 2 receiver on this team would be Malik Washington, who's actually coming off of a pretty solid game this past week. You come in here, he saw extended usage, 5 catches, 52 yards in a game where Tua did not have his 2 of his starting offensive linemen. So Tua was not able to throw downfield at all. He threw 3 interceptions. He looked terrible. If they can get one or both of those guys back next week, the passing attack should go back to what it was looking like from weeks 10 to 14, the most efficient passing attack in the NFL. If we look at the usage for Washington in this game, he played 40 snaps, ran 31 routes. He was actually being used behind Grant Dubois in the first half, but then Dubois got hurt as well. Grant Dubois got hurt as well. So it looks like he'll be the clear wide receiver 2 on this team if Waddle was to miss. Again, if you're in a 10-team league, maybe even a 12-team league, there's a good chance you have better options here. But if you're in a multiple flex league, a deeper league, Malik Washington could be a valuable piece moving forward. And one final thing on Washington, if you're not familiar with this guy, I mean, one of the most productive wide receivers in college football last year, over 1,400 yards for the University, I believe, Virginia, right? Yeah, University of Virginia in his final year there. He then went to the NFL Combine, and he, according to Player Profiler's workout metrics, he had well more than above average speed, elite burst. That's his biggest thing. We kind of saw this past week, burst in the short areas, burst at the top of his routes. So this is a player who does have a lot of talent. He has a career past production of history, has a lot of speed, which fits Miami as well. So an interesting player for your 12 to 14 team leagues. Now, somebody that you actually could start in probably most of your 12 team leagues, heck, even in some of your 10 team leagues, if you have multiple flex spots or you're in a bind, is Jalen McMillan, another rookie, this one a 3rd round rookie for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who has been really breaking out as of late. Because this past week for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, McMillan ran the 2nd most routes, or he actually tied for the league team high with Mike Evans, 2nd most snaps, 6 targets in this game behind Evans, who had an absolutely huge day. Now Evans, by the way, only has to average 103 yards per game to continue to have 1,000 yards per year. He just dominated this past week. But it was another good week for Jalen McMillan, who caught 5 balls, 75 yards, and a touchdown. I think all of his production came in the first half on 6 targets, was the clear wide receiver 2 in this game. And look, here's the thing. McMillan, when Chris Godwin and Evans was out, the rookie wasn't doing much, but all the pressure was on him. All the defensive attention was on him. With Evans back, that hasn't been the case. The past 2 weeks, McMillan has now set new career highs in receiving yards in back-to-back games. He had about 57 yards last week, and now in week 15, 75 yards. He just has less defensive attention on him. It looks like this rookie is breaking out, and he's going to get another great matchup in week 16. Oh, these Bucs fantasy playoff schedules are great. Last week, we obviously saw both those guys, Evans and McMillan, go off. This week, a matchup on the road against the Cowboys. They are 4-point favorites. If you look at the point spread in this one, 49 points. Expect a lot of points. Expect Mike Evans to have a lot of attention on him. One-on-one matchups for McMillan. I'm expecting another 6 to 8 target game, potential 5 or 6 catch game here for McMillan, a flex option indeed. Now, quickly on this next scenario, we talked about it in the past, but now it's becoming more real, so let's discuss it again. And that would be Hollywood Brown of the Chiefs, who could make his season debut in week 16, maybe at worst in week 17 for you. Now, again, how much will he play? Will he be limited? These are all concerns. We'll have to track the injury reports, but it's at least worth mentioning if he's not in somebody's IR spot or you don't have an IR spot in your league, maybe worth a stash. Because this Chiefs team still does not know what the heck their wide receiver room looks like. Look at this past week alone. Xavier Worthy sees a career high 11 targets. He basically does nothing with them. I think he had like 30 yards on those 11 targets and 3 carries. Justin Watson, we know what he is. Juju scored a touchdown this past week, but we know what he is. Even DeAndre Hopkins is now playing less snaps and running more routes than Juju. I don't know if they're saving DeAndre Hopkins maybe for the postseason. An older receiver who's been dealing with a knee issue basically the entire year, came into the season with a tear in his left knee. But if you look at the week 16 matchup at home against the Texans secondary that has been struggling lately, it's a nice spot if Hollywood Brown was able to play. I do think Hollywood Brown would be the best Chiefs receiver depending on how healthy he actually is from this shoulder injury. But here's the other piece that's concerning. We just got news that Patrick Mahomes is now considered week to week with a high ankle sprain. He's played through a high ankle sprain in the past, but it will limit his mobility and ability to extend. So overall, it's not like the greatest outlook here. Will Hollywood Brown even get a full-time role? Now his quarterback's hurt, but it's at least, if you're in a deeper league with nothing left on the waivers like there are in a lot of my leagues, worth a pickup. Another guy that's worth a pickup is Jalen Colker, another rookie here, an undrafted rookie for the Carolina Panthers. He returned from an injury this past week that's kept him out like the last 3 to 4 weeks. And what does he do? He leads the team right away in snaps, playing 48. He runs 31 routes, second on the team behind Adam Thielen with 6 targets in this one, and the kid looked good. He had a 100-yard game. He had a big touchdown reception in this one against Dallas. So again, Dallas, Tampa's playing them next week. This is a really good matchup for wide receivers. And now if we look at this tweet from Ryan Heath here, you can see that Jalen Colker returned. He led the team in receiving yards at 110 and fantasy points with 21. But here's the thing. He now averages 66 yards per game on a 20% target share in his games with Bryce Young this year. Bryce Young's only getting better. This is an undrafted rookie who's averaging 66 yards per game, which would rank him easily in the top 20 receivers this year. A 20% target share is also up there. And this past week, Xavier Legette left with a groin injury. Immediately, Coker, if we look at this right here, these snaps from PFF was playing ahead of David Moore. So Xavier Legette's hurt right now. David Moore is clearly behind Coker. Adam Thielen is mostly a slot receiver. The number one outside receiver right now for Bryce Young and an improving Panthers offense is Jalen Colker, who this upcoming week gets a solid matchup as a 4-point home underdog against against Arizona. Arizona's defense this year has been trending. It depends on the week almost. This will be a good matchup, obviously, for Arizona's defense against the Panthers. But if they're going to be playing from behind at home, 35 pass attempts for Bryce Young, probably another 7 to 8 plus targets for Jalen Colker. Interesting flex option. And this dude's available in over 70% of leagues. Rashad Bateman is honestly having finally the breakout year because he's just staying healthy at this point, right? If you scroll down here on player profile, all of his past seasons, he's just been banged up. 12 games, 6 games. Last year, he finally gets to play a little bit more, but that's the year when Mark Andrews is there. I think I didn't even show you. They're right here. Here's the 12 games, right? He misses 4 games. He misses basically his whole second year. Then this past year, he was in and out of a lot of games, and that one doesn't fully miss games, but Zay Flowers took over as the wide receiver 1. But this year, it's finally all coming together. He'll probably set a career high in targets. He might set a career high in receptions. He's already done it in receiving yards. He's already done it in touchdowns. If we scroll over to his touchdowns, 7 touchdowns this year is 3 more than his previous 3 seasons combined. He's been looking a lot better. And this past week, he scores twice. He has 5 targets, another 20% target share. He's now had at least 11 fantasy points in 50% of his games this year, meaning that he's been a pretty consistent flex option, especially for you guys in deeper leagues. And he's attached to, if not the MVP, well, obviously the reigning MVP, Lamar Jackson, top 2 option this year for MVP with Josh Allen. He's behind him for sure, but that's how good of the offense he's been in. This week, they're 6-point favorites. They're projected for over 24 points again against the Steelers, who play a lot of single high coverage this year. Single high coverage is something that we've seen Rashad Bateman in previous matchups against Pittsburgh and teams like that find success against. Maybe a nice flex option in deeper leagues for you. And a very similar profiler for this next guy, and it's Romeo Doubs. And honestly, I like Romeo Doubs slightly more than Rashad Bateman as a waiver ad this week. I would argue that he is the number 1 right up there with Jalen McMillan waiver ad at the wide receiver position, because Doubs returned from a concussion this week. He missed the past 2 games. And what does he do? He immediately runs the most routes on the team according to PFF. He runs 25, plays 48 snaps, earns 5 targets, gets a touchdown early on in the first quarter of this game, gets a touchdown later on to end the game on a crazy dive and catch. Romeo Doubs has been the number 1 receiver for the Packers this year when healthy in terms of route run and snaps, in terms of red zone catches and deep catches. He's been number 1 in all those categories. It's crazy to say this, but honestly, at this point, heading into a strong week 16 matchup, I'd rather have Romeo Doubs than Jaden Reed. And in that matchup, we've talked about it earlier, they're 13-point favorites against the Saints. Probably a big Josh Jacobs game here. Would not be shocked if he goes for another 120 plus yards like he did this past week and like he's done really the past 2 months. But if the Packers are still forced to throw 20 to 25 times, don't be shocked if Romeo Doubs finds the end zone again. I think he's somebody worth adding not just for week 16, but also week 17 as a solid flex option. So these have been the final waiver ads of the year. Next week is championship week. We won't have a video because you kind of know your matchups at that point. Maybe you have to pick up a kicker or defense, but you know what you need to do. We'll be sending out the waiver wire tiers in the fantasy blueprint per usual though. So if you have that, go ahead. If you don't, we'll kind of put a QR code up here if you want to get access to the final couple of weeks of rankings, projections, game notes. But appreciate you all a ton. Be sure to hit the subscribe button before you go. And we will see you later on this week for the best matchups of the week video for the fantasy semifinals.